Tonight I'm going to tell you the story of two different men. They both loved the Lord, were believers, strong men of faith. And they had two tragedies that occurred, one to each of them, but these tragedies were very similar. But each man responded to this disaster, this tragedy, in different ways. The first man, I won't mention his name, but a very famous gospel singer a few years ago. He and his wife had adopted a little girl from China. And one day there was a tragic accident in the driveway of their family home. The little girl was about 5 years old, and the car ran over her. And when they ran to tend her, it was obvious that she was near death. And so he responded as most of us would respond in America today. He grabbed his cell phone, his mobile phone. He called 911. They came and they sent a life flight helicopter to take this child to an emergency hospital that specialized in children. The best doctors in the area worked on this child for a long time, but sadly, she didn't make it and she passed away. And of course, they were heartbroken, devastated. As a parent, I can't imagine what it would be like to lose my own child, but it has to be one of the greatest of tragedies. But now I'm going to tell you the story of a Chinese man named Wai Chi. This is taken from the book Mega Shift, written by Jim Rutz. Now, a little backdrop here. Jim Rutz spent 40 years traveling the world, visiting what he had heard were moves of the Spirit, like revivals, but places in the earth, different places where there were these miraculous signs and wonders, because he was very frustrated that here at home we were not seeing these signs and wonders, even though the Bible says that these signs will follow them that believe. So this is one of the stories that he recorded in his travels. There were eyewitnesses that he interviewed, and it's one of the most remarkable tales I have ever heard in the kingdom. One of the 7 leaders of the Chinese Christian church was Wang Chi. Wang spent 13 years in prison, loading rocks onto a truck by hand. His daily quota was staggering. By 1996, his health had broken and he was near death. So the government of China did not want the embarrassment of a top religious leader to die in their prison. So they sent him home to be with his family. And once he got home, the most amazing thing, Papa Rapha, the God who is my healer, showed up, and Wang Chi was healed. The next year, he and his wife had their second child. It was a girl. The first was also a girl, but she was 3 years old when Wang Chi was arrested, and he was in prison for 13 years, so she was 16 years old now. But now they welcomed their second baby girl. At that time, there were just 4 major strands of the Chinese Christian church. They were at odds, divisive, denominationally not on the same page. Does that sound familiar? It happens in every country. So this troubled Wai Chi because he was a leader and he wanted unity in the body. Suspicions and condemnation reigned all across the land within the church ranks. And so he saw this as a major threat to the future of the church in China. So in December of that year, he called for a summit meeting in the city of Hainan province. On the morning, the other 3 leaders were arriving. Wang's daughter was hanging, his 16-year-old daughter was hanging out clothes on a clothesline attached to their 4th floor apartment. She had the baby in her backpack, but as she leaned over to wave goodbye to her papa, the baby twisted unexpectedly, fell out of the backpack, plunging 3 floors to instant death on the ground below. Her head had split wide open. In a state of shock, Wang gathered up the remains, put the body in a blanket, and laid it on the couch in the living room. Then he prayed loudly, Lord, if this unity meeting in China is of you, then you have to heal my daughter. Now remind you, she's not only dead, but her head has been split open and brain matter has come out. If you don't, then I'm finished serving you because I just can't take this anymore. Remember, 13 years in prison because of his trust in the Lord. And I'll know that unity vision is not of you. Then he left his heart behind on the couch and in his home and staggered off to the meeting. And he struggled, but he wanted unity in the body. I can't imagine any American, myself included, writes Jim Rutz, willing to look so foolish. After a hard day of prayer and negotiation, Wang returned home and looked at the couch. The baby was still dead, but amazingly, her head and body were put back together again. This is a miracle. One piece. In faith, he praised God and gave thanks. The next morning, there was no change in the child. She was still dead, but intact. And so he prayed again, and he said, Lord, I thank you for healing my daughter. And he left for that day of the conference. When he came home that evening, he found that the baby was breathing. She was alive. But she was in a deep coma. Again, Wai Chi gave great thanks and praise. The next morning, the third day, coincidental, put his feelings behind him as best he could and went to the meeting again. That was a day of salvation for the Church of China, a major breakthrough. They found ways to work together as a unified body for the glory of Christ. The largest church on earth was saved from perhaps decades of fragmentation and destructive conflict. Returning home that evening, Wai Chi found his daughter awake, alert, eating happily, and perfectly whole in every way. Today, she is a bouncy 7-year-old who reflects the joy of her father when he sees his children living in unity. One man did the logical thing that we do here in a civilized first world country. We go to the doctor. We call 911. We rely on emergency room doctors and surgeons and whatever is called for, and the medications and the equipment and the machinery. And sometimes it works out okay. But in that case with this gospel singer's daughter, it didn't. She died. And about the same time, it happened the same year, there is a man who had been in prison for 13 years for his faith in China, who was called to go and help restore the body to a unity before the Lord. And his daughter had a tragic accident and she died. But he did not give up hope. He did not give up his trust in Jehovah Rapha, the God who is my healer. And that miraculous, rejoicing, wonderful occasion came about on the third day. So I want to challenge you to think about healing versus treatment, sickness and disease management, doctor versus physician.